Hey, hey, hey. Morning, guys. Welcome to your nutrition hot seat. We are going to share our screen and we're probably just going to wait 30 seconds and then we will just jump through our presentation for you, just to kind of keep it short and sweet, precise the information as we can, just so it's not 30 minutes later, you're then done with it. Just bear with us a second.
Just give it 10 seconds, see if anyone joins. If not, we'll crack straight on.
Howdy, howdy. It's very different doing it on Zoom rather than Facebook. We normally ask for a little wave, so we'll just see what happens.
I know it isn't necessarily as easy to get on as well, but where we've done the hot seats to try and provide actual physical information so you can follow along with what we're talking about at the same time, it's a lot easier to do that on here. What we might look at the next time we run the challenge is how we can, I think there's a way to do Zoom and Facebook within Facebook. So I'm going to look into that. Right, should we get started?
Yeah, so let's crack straight on. So the word diet, what do we associate with this? Well, it's got to be, all the Slimming Worlds and stuff like that, but actually it's not. Diet just means the foods we habitually eat. So our daily foods that we consume.
So we've got a nice picture there of a bunch of what you could call healthier side of things in terms of food. But Sam summed it up. It's what you eat day in, day out. That's what makes up your diet.
So with this, guys, as well, Beth has done her degree in nutrition. So she's not Beth, the coach you know now. She's going to turn into Scientist Beth. And I'm going to dip in as and when, but I'm going to now hand you over to Beth for this.
Yeah, so as Sam said, I've got my degree in exercise sports science. And within that degree, I spent the last 2 years in the nutrition field as well. So doing a lot of kind of lab studies and things like that nutritionally. So a lot of this, I've been working in the nutrition space since I was about 14 in terms of as a professional athlete, and then within my college and then my degree, and then obviously continuing that as a coach for the last however many years. So first and foremost, when it comes to nutrition, I'm going to try and not make this longer than 20 minutes because I want it to be easily digestible. So Sam's also going to tell me to crack on if I blab too much. Or I listened to a podcast yesterday and somebody was like, it's great when you can see someone comes alive when they get to talk about a topic. For many of you, maybe because we see you, whether it's PT or boot camp, we don't necessarily always get to deep dive into some things as often as I would like, hence the YouTube channel with all the videos and things like that. And obviously this is another chance for us to do a bit more of a deep dive. So some of this will be familiar for some of you, some of this will be absolutely alien. But your diet is made up of 4 main macronutrients: protein, top left; carbs, bottom left; fats, top right; and believe it or not, alcohol, bottom right. And they all have a caloric value, i.e. a gram of them equates to an amount of calories or an amount of energy. Okay, that's what we can think of calories as. So on the left, you've got the protein and carbs that equate to 4 calories per gram. Okay, so if you had 10 grams of protein, you've got 40 calories. Same for carbohydrates. Then we've got fats at 9 calories per gram, 10 grams of fat, 90 calories. Then we've got alcohol at 7, and obviously you can see where I'm going with that. 10 grams of alcohol, 70 calories. Now, we're going to scratch alcohol straight off. Yes, it's a macronutrient. The thing with alcohol that you guys have got to bear in mind is, I hate the term empty calories, but when it comes to alcohol, it's a very loose term that you could use to describe them. So when it comes to the digestion of alcohol, your body, if you're putting food and alcohol in the system at the same time, your body wants to remove the toxins from alcohol as quickly as possible. So it will start digesting that first, okay, which is where there's nothing to necessarily soak up and utilize, you're going straight through into a digestive kind of setup where you're not really going to take anything from it, but it almost jumps the queue before everything else. And that can obviously just mix up digestion, hence you can feel unwell, and all sorts of other things. But what we have to understand as coaches, we drink.
Yeah.
We're not heavy drinkers, but we socialize, we'll go out for dinner, we'll have a glass of wine, we'll go around friends, we'll do the same thing. We don't advocate that you cut alcohol out unless you have a difficult relationship with it or you just don't like it. But we advocate as with anything, a balanced approach.
Yeah.
Okay. And understanding that whatever you're drinking has an energy value to it where you can't take anything nutritional from it. Okay. Then when it comes to protein, protein is the be all and end all, really. For many of you, we might look at tracking calories, for example, and then we might then do a deeper dive into tracking protein. And we're going to come to protein more so in a second, but it's probably the most important macronutrient in terms of recovery, growth, etc. Carbs are your most important macronutrient for energy. They are the only energy source of the brain, so they should not be fully removed from your diet. And carbs are not the enemy, but again, we'll come back to that in a second. Carbs, it's about utilizing them for your lifestyle, and it's about understanding how they're stored. So the myth of carbs making you fatter or heavier if you're standing on the scales. Carbs need to be stored in your muscles as glycogen. For it to be stored in your muscles, it needs water as part of its storage, which is where if you reduce carbs massively, sometimes you can see a 6-10 pound drop on the scales in a week. That is more to do with the water weight dropping because you're not storing as much glycogen in your body. So it's generally 4 parts water for 1 part carb. So 4 grams of water to 1 gram of glycogen stored in the muscles. It's water weight. It's not body fat. It's just how you have to store the glycogen in order for it to then be readily broken down and used as energy in your muscles. And then fats, we have kind of all sorts of fats, monounsaturated, saturated, etc., etc. We have a good picture in the corner that shows you some of the more important ones. What you have to be careful with in a high fat diet is it means also higher calories for less food, but fat is also quite satiating, so it can help you stay fuller for longer along with protein. But that's a quick rundown of the 3. We're going to focus a bit more on protein today. If anybody has any questions around carbs or fats, put them below and we will do our best to answer them. It doesn't mean don't drink, does it?
No, it's just all about balance, guys. So this brings us on to vitamins, minerals, and kind of supplementation. So why do we need to supplement our diet, Beth?
Well, ideally, we want to look at the foods that we habitually eat, our diet, and if we can get as much as we can possibly can from our diet itself, we've got less need to supplement. But there are a few things that we should consider supplementing, specifically like this time of year, but also depending on your diet. So for example, Sandra would have to think maybe slightly differently with a vegan diet in terms of like B12 and things like this. So there's a few vitamins and minerals that won't pop up as readily in certain foods as they will others. If you don't eat a lot of oily fish, for example, you've got to think about your omegas. If you don't eat a lot of meat, you've got to think about your essential amino acids and how you can partner them up. And if you don't get a lot of daylight, we might need to think about vitamin D, which we'll come on to in a second. And then there's things like supporting our daily function. Iron and magnesium are really important for recovery, brain health, etc. So it's looking at, have we got a lot of iron and magnesium rich foods, broccolis, lentils, certain meats, certain grains, etc. Have we got a wide spectrum of colour and food in your diet? If so, your need for supplementation may be very small. And the one thing that we would probably suggest in winter for everyone here would be a vitamin D supplement. Generally looking at, I think it's about 2,500 IUs per person. But if you want a link for some good vitamin D supplementation, we can share that into the group if you're not already supplementing it. But it is now dark.
The perfect time to add that into your daily routine.
Yeah, if you get a bit of daylight through like March to October and you're outside often enough, you might not need to supplement with vitamin D. But we are now, and the research is leading us to suggest that pretty much everyone we work with from October through to March, specifically if you work inside and you're up in the dark and getting back from work in the dark, you need to be thinking about vitamin D. Magnesium, if you've got a heavy training load, should be something a lot of us are thinking about in terms of recovery. It's something I need to add back into my diet. And then we've put EAAs in there, which are essential amino acids. Now, our body can't make these. There's 13 of them, and they are found within every animal product, okay? Every animal product. So long as we have animal products within our diet, we are going to get enough of our essential amino acids. If we can't have animal products in our diet, we need to think about how we can be bringing these in, hence things like B12, but also making sure that we are finding alternative meat products which are getting better and better and better, but also using grains, legumes, pulses, beans, different veggies, things like that, and then supplementing where needed with any essential amino acids might be a consideration if you're not eating a lot of meat. Generally, the rule for supplementation is your diet should get you 90% of the way there. Certain things you can't help, lack of sunlight, for example, we can't do anything about that in winter. Other things, it's a case of before raiding Holland and Barrett or Amazon for a bunch of pills in the corner, when Sam was designing this, we were sat there and we were going, actually, like this bit down here should be your pill first. Look at your diet before you jump to supplementation because it's a trend or because your coaches say so. Look at your diet first, get more color into your diet, because that's what we would tell you first. We would look at your diet and go, this is missing, this is missing. And if we think, do you know what you could do with chopping things up, like we've been speaking to a few of you about the training load, potentially magnesium could be a consideration. If you don't have a lot of oily fish, omega-3s are super important to be getting in. Normally the supplement comes with 3s and 6s. You can get it laced with vitamin D, therefore it's 3 at the price of 1. It's not as high amount as vitamin D as you could probably do with, but it would give you a base top up. If anyone has any specific supplementation questions, it requires a specific answer from one of either Sam or me. So shoot away either on WhatsApp, ask us, because we now know what it is that you're eating. So if you're thinking now about vitamin D, for example, or magnesium, or where to start with, D, C, do you get a general multivit, all of these type of questions, reach out to us individually and we can let you know what we think would be best for you going forwards. But as a rule, we tend to I take omegas, vitamin D, and I'm probably going to add some magnesium going forwards. I think you're similar.
Similar, mainly vitamin D at the moment, but with different training styles, magnesium might be something coming into my diet as well. But hopefully with this kind of being covered in this nutrition hot seat, this gives you an idea of why in some of your check-ins we've been going, where's your colour? Can we aim for 4 to 5 fruit and veggies a day? Because it doesn't have the same, for example, cost of living right now. Fruit and veg is loads cheaper than probably your supplementation. So if you can find it in that supermarket rather than getting that pill pot like in the top right corner with multiple vitamins, can you start in your diet to begin with and get that variety first? So this leads us on to TDEE. Now we're going to go through this, guys, but we're also going to jump off it and try and help you understand how you calculate it as well. I'll let you go.
So your TDEE is your total daily energy expenditure. That's what we look at as coaches in order to keep an eye on where your calories are at, whether we need to change anything, tweak anything, increase or decrease anything. What is it made up of? Well, it's made up of basically the 4 aspects of your life that see you spending energy. Number 1, your metabolic rate, basal metabolic rate. That encompasses you staying alive. So you regulating your body temperature, you blinking, you, I don't know, basically yawning, anything like that. Imagine if you were to just lie still all day, the energy your body would burn to regulate itself throughout the day with no movement, no digestion, and no exercise. So it's everything else encompassed in that. That is your biggest calorie burn of the day by a country mile, okay? By a country mile, over 50% of what you burn on a day comes from keeping you alive and in that homeostatic state, okay? From there, homeostasis basically means that kind of we're staying in that bridge of staying alive. We don't want to move too far out of that comfort zone. Your body doesn't want to. Anyway, we like to test it, but your body doesn't always like it. So after that, the next one to consider that we have little to no control over, we do have a little bit, but not a lot, is your thermic effective meals. So that's your digestion. So once we've eaten, that system has to come alive, work obviously the food through the stomach, start digesting it, getting it into the small intestine, large intestine, through the bowel, and obviously out the other end is the politest way of putting it. And within that, we've got to absorb as much as we can. And we've got all those other systems going on, transporting the nutrients to the different places of the body where they need to be. Thermic effective meals is going to take up about 10% of your day. What you can do is one of the reasons we promote obviously a higher protein diet. Protein is the most satiating of all macronutrients. It keeps you fuller for longer, but it also takes the most amount of effort to break down. So it will just ever so slightly increase that thermic effective meal window. It's about a third of the calories of, say, for example, you ate, 90 grams of protein, you'd spend 30 calories of that roughly, or 30 grams of it, 1/3 of it, consuming it, digesting it, versus carbs and fats and obviously alcohol where it isn't quite that high. So about a third of the energy that it brings in is spent on trying to digest it and break it down into all of its essential amino acids and send it around the body. NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is the biggest window you have control over. Why do you think we talk about steps and daily movement so much?
Why do you think we set you a press up and squats challenge on top of your workouts?
Yes, and it's everything from me getting up now and walking downstairs, to me going and doing some cleaning, to me going and doing some gardening. It's basically any movement that isn't prescribed exercise, okay? And it is the biggest window you have control over. An hour's worth of exercise is Diddy, look, it's at the top, is near enough the same effect as how much you're eating in a day. Nearly. It's a bit more, but it's not that much greater. We really want you to look at that NEAT and go, next to me being alive and keeping myself alive, the next thing I have control over of how many calories I burn in a day, how much energy I expend, is how much you move. So when you hate us for a step target, that's us trying to give you a figure, a workable figure whereby we can control your NEAT as much as possible. The more you move, the more you burn. If we then make sure we've got the food right and you're looking for a fat loss goal, the more fat we can drop.
Definitely.
At the very top, we have exercise. Now, what we did last week was we spoke about training, and we said that weight loss was probably number 10 on our list for reasons why you would train. And this is another support mechanism for that, because it isn't the biggest tool in your, if we're on a fat loss journey, let's all just go with that. If we're on a fat loss journey, it's not our biggest tool. What it's there for is muscle development, muscle strength, joint health, bone health, mental health, performance metrics, and it will elicit a calorie burn, which will, if we're in a calorie deficit, lead to us dropping body fat. But your exercise is how you dictate what your body can look like as we're going through this journey, okay? It isn't your biggest tool for fat loss, but it is going to give you a calorie burn. So that's just important for us to share.
Yeah. Are we going to go into it as well?
Yeah.
So the details on the side, guys, just for reference on this slide, are what you need to be able to work out your TDEE. So we'll just quickly jump into it just to explain how you do it. So when you go onto this website, literally pop in Google TDEE calculator. I'm really struggling to say that this morning. I don't really know why. Apologies. So with it, obviously, depending on how you work out your kilos or pounds, pick metric or imperial, then age, weight, and then height is always in centimeters. Then it comes to your activity. Now, if you're at that desk job, what did we say steps wise?
It was like very little movement, standing up occasionally.
Yeah, so standing up occasionally, that kind of thing, you'd go sedentary. If you then do a couple of times a week exercise, that kind of thing, and hit 10k steps, you go light exercise. For myself and Beth, because of how much we train and how active we are in our day-to-day jobs, we put ourselves at moderately exercise. But the thing with this, guys, is I'd err on caution with it. Don't overestimate it and go, oh, I do like 6 training sessions a week because I go for a 4-mile walk, I do PT on this day. Like, underestimate it if anything, because it's also based on that NEAT value as well.
And with the underestimation of it, it's important to understand that if we're calorie tracking, and we'll come to it in a second, but I'm definitely going to be a 30-minute hot seat, sorry. If we are calorie tracking, there's still a portion of error, and it's quite a substantial portion of error. Most of us inaccurately track anywhere between 100 and 300 calories a day. So we've got this number, then we're inputting into MyFitnessPal or another nutrition app, and we've got to allow for a margin of error. Okay. So that's where Sam said, if you're unsure, so if you do train, say with us 3 times a week, but your steps aren't always 10, or you don't move that much, go light, even though light only says it's 1 or 2. If you do train 4+ times a week, but your steps aren't great, maybe go moderate. So it's, you know, not every day do I absolutely smash out 15,000 steps. I don't have to think about 10, but I don't always do 15 to 20. So it changes, which would mean my daily caloric need on that day changes. But what we're looking to do is create an average. So this is handy because it gives you what you could have over a week. You could divide that by 7, and you could do this, for example, 2,167. Or you could look at that and go, cool, I've got 15,000 across the week. I'm going to split it to maybe 1,900 Monday to Friday, and then it would be a bit more like 2,300 on a weekend, for example. Or you focus it around your training days, depending on your need for energy requirements. So it's a really, really good website. It's the one that we tend to use. We look at a few. There generally is a few calories difference depending on what rule they've used and what formula. You can see the formula that they have used. It's normally written somewhere here. So you've got different formulas that you can use within the TDE calculator in terms of how we can add things up. And then it gives you an idea here of maintenance, bulking and cutting. Now, I hate this, but let's just go to cutting. I hate the term, but say we're looking to drop body fat. What this calculator does, which we don't do, is it goes, cool, you want to drop body fat, take 500 calories straight off and crack on. Now, you might not need to drop 500 calories. You might need to drop, say, 10%. To start with. So say we did 10% of that, we're looking at 210-ish, 216, let's call it. So it might be that we pitch you just under 2,000 as your everyday total, and we track that for 2 to 4 weeks before we make another change. Why commit to all the way to 500 if you could get the same results, maybe with like an extra 4 to 6 week window, but very similar results with the ability to eat more, to still go out with your friends, to still enjoy things, because we haven't got a time span on things. We're not looking to do any form of athletic performance where we need to be a certain weight within 4 weeks. We don't need to be that aggressive. So we wouldn't advocate going straight to a 500 calorie drop. We'd normally work out where you should be sitting and take 10 to 20% off that and try and gauge you through. If we haven't had this conversation with you, it's because we haven't needed to, because where you're tracking is already sitting potentially even lower than where we would put you. So it's taking into account the fact that you don't need to be as aggressive with it as it says on here.
I was just going to add, this also breaks down obviously what we spoke about at the beginning, the macronutrients. So if we were to break down that protein, like on MyFitnessPal, you can go into your days, go into your nutrients, that will show you where are you at with your protein, fats, carbs, also sugars and all sorts like that. But the 3 main ones you want to focus on are there to look at. So if we deep dived, continue to work with you, for example, they would be a target we would then really nail on. Potentially for a few, we might look at it for the weeks coming anyway.
Yeah, so if we are tracking and we want to go a little bit deeper, expect us over the next few weeks to start looking at your protein intake. Even if it's on a nutrition diary, for example, rather than MyFitnessPal, we can still look at it. And this is an example for me. So you should expect, with how active I am, that I should be able to eat about 2,000 calories a day and maintain roughly where I am, including performance, not really gain or lose any body fat. And I sit between these two, higher carb and moderate carb. I am not a low carb person in the slightest, but I do aim for about 100 grams of protein per day. Well, yeah, 100 to 120. And then if I'm having like salmon, for example, which I love, I'm aware that my day will be slightly higher in fat because it's a fatty fish. If I'm having normal meats, chickens, etc., I'm probably going to sit more at this end and allow myself a few more carbs.
Hopefully that makes sense, guys. But if anyone has any additional questions on that, please let us know. If you want to know your protein, fats and carbs split, we can let you know as well.
Protein.
Go on.
So with protein, the NHS recommendation is 0.75 grams per kilogram of body weight as a minimum. Sometimes it can creep up to about 1 gram per kilogram of body weight in other journals, but it's super, super low. We normally try and aim off of 1.2 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So I am 67 kilos. My maths is terrible. I normally sit closer to the 1.5 because I go for about 120 grams. So I'm going my body weight, or my body weight times 2 even. I normally go towards the 2 mark to maintain muscle mass, to help with recovery, etc., etc. But if I'm really struggling on any given day, I'm always going, right, I must hit 100 grams because I know that's 67 plus another 40. So I'm looking at, about 1.7-ish, 1.6, 1.7 grams per kilogram of body weight. This is getting very sciencey. This is stuff that we can sort out for you. And then you've just got to understand that protein is super important for recovery, bone health, so much. And we can only get essential amino acids into our diet from the foods that we're eating. And you can see here, it doesn't have to just be the classic meat and dairy. Yes, meat and dairy, because they're animal products, are loaded with it, but we have other tools at our disposal. If anyone has any questions around alternative food, speaking to either myself or potentially Sandra to see what she thinks on a vegan diet as to really nice alternatives, if you're looking for like a meat-free day, etc., we can always have that discussion in the group as well. But in and around training, we just need to understand that for ourselves day to day, protein timing isn't really that important. Okay, you want to be making sure that if you weigh 60 kilos, for example, we're looking to get at least 90 grams. So that's like 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. Okay, if we can, but minimum ticking that body weight position. So 60 grams, you weigh 60 kilos, you've got to get at least 60 grams of protein in on any given day. Then we're ticking the basic NHS guideline. We want to be a little bit ahead of that. It's going to help with your recovery. It's going to help with training. It's going to help maintain muscle mass, especially if you're dropping body fat, because we don't want to start attacking our muscles for energy, which is what we will do, rather than sometimes going to stored fat. Your actual timing of it is not important ahead of your overall total amount being ticked. If you're ticking your total amount across the day, then you can start going muscle protein synthesis, which is the kind of digestion of protein into your muscles, occurs optimally every 4 to 6 hours. So it sits very comfortably within our general meal cycle, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And the optimum amount of protein that we can synthesize at any one time is anywhere between 25 to 35 grams. So that, in short, is 30 grams of protein at breakfast, 30 grams of protein at lunch, 30 grams of protein at dinner, gets you 90 grams of protein across the day. Not super hard, but not super easy either. You have to think about it. And the meal you have to think about it with is breakfast. So protein powders are a great help. Greek yogurt is a great help. Eggs are a great help. Different things like that are obviously a great help. Lunch and dinner can be made slightly easier, specifically if there's a meat or meat alternative source in each of those meals. But I don't want to get you too bogged down in science because I'm getting excited and getting too geeky. But if you can hit your daily target, that is priority numero uno. If you're nailing that, start making sure you're splitting it as evenly as you possibly can, even if it's like 20 grams, 40 grams, 25 grams across those 3 meals. That will optimally synthesize protein throughout the day for you. I hope that makes sense. Am I getting too sciencey?
No, you're all right. I mean, you might be a little bit overwhelmed. Just try and stick with us. We've only got 2 more slides left. All right. So we're going to cover some myths versus the facts kind of things. So Beth, when should I eat protein? What about if I eat my dinner late at night?
Meal timing does not matter in the slightest. Doesn't matter in the slightest. It's comfort. The actual digestion of the meals isn't going to change that much. It's personal preference. It isn't going to change total calories. The total calories is what it is. If you're over on your calories, then you're not in a deficit for that given day. If you're not in a deficit for that given day, and that's on repeat, you're going to gain body fat, vice versa.
That leads us nicely into, well, I shouldn't eat after 6, surely. Eating
after 6 is a great one. Because it's trying to do 2 things. Number one, it's putting the fear of God into you that if you eat after 6, you're going to gain fat. That's not the case. If you eat at midnight, but you've in that window from midnight the day before to that midnight, you have tracked and you are sitting at your calorie target, then you're absolutely fine. Doesn't matter. Again, it just boils down to ease of digestion and your comfort when you go to sleep.
Yeah.
The difficulty with eat after 6 is what the myth was trying to do was trying to stop people from picking. So if you have your main dinner and then you set this whole can't eat after dinner rule, or don't eat after 6-ish rule, don't eat after dinner, it's trying to stop you from going to the sweet cupboard, from going to get a dessert type thing and then accidentally send you over your calories, or you've got no idea on what calories you're eating, but you're there deep diving into your treat cupboard or treat box. That generally happens after your dinner. So it's a rule that's trying to get you out of that habit.
And then that leads us really nicely onto, which we've briefly covered, carbs are the enemy. I've got to cut them out. I can't eat carbs. Jeez.
Carbs are my best friend. If any of you have seen me on a day where I've not eaten carbs, I'm like literally the devil. Carbs are not the enemy. Carbs have been labelled as the enemy by a number of different diet protocols that absolutely drives me round the bend. Carbs need water to be stored. So if you've had a lot of carbs and you stand on the scales, you are going to come up heavier. The scales are not a representation of your body fat total. The scales represent how much you weigh so that gravity can act on you on any given day and stop you from floating away. Carbs are not the enemy. They just happen to need to be stored with water. They are the only source of energy for this thing. So if you go low carb and you go low carb properly, try and function. It's a nightmare. I've done it. I've been there and done it. That's the thing. I've dieted for a photo shoot and I had a very, very low carb diet and it wasn't fun. And I've done a course, I've been in the army and things like that, where you are on low carbs and you're trying to function as a human being and it does not work because you raid your liver for energy source because your body is being energetic and it's ran out of energy. So it goes to the liver and goes, you know what, brain doesn't need it, I need it. Then you try and function and talk. If you've properly ran out of carbs, it's a nightmare. They're not the enemy. They should be utilized really well around training and they form part of an easier diet to live with because it fits with family, socials, etc.
Okay, but I really want to drop body fat. I'm going to get some fat burners. I think they'll do the job, won't they? With some pills, yeah?
Right.
I'm being a quiz master today, guys.
There is a market for them, and sadly there are many people tricked into believing that fat burners will help because there's a picture of a before and after and it looks like it has helped. What fat burners tend to be laced with is like a lot of green tea and a lot of caffeine. So you tend to move more and your digestion tends to flow a little quicker, and then that's generally the premise that they work on. They shouldn't be used in conjunction with the CCC and hopefully should not be used in conjunction with boot camp or personal training with either of us.
It's not something we recommend, but it's something we wanted to put up there because if we've had people ask about them, it's not something that we recommend. Remember the word diet. It's the things we habitually eat. Then let's go on to some different methods, let's say. I'm just going to skip breakfast. I think that will help me.
So this is the last page and it sums up everything that we've gone through really well. And we're going to take that we're sitting on this fat loss stool. So the principle, how you achieve fat loss over time, the principle is a calorie deficit. You have to be in a calorie deficit to drop body fat. No, I'm not saying body weight. To drop body fat, you have to be in a calorie deficit over time, not over a week, not over 2 weeks, not over 3 weeks, but building from that probably 3 weeks onwards. Consistency is key. If you are in a calorie deficit and you're progressive with it, you will drop body fat. That's the principle. Here, on the outside of the principle, you have a number of different methods in achieving that principle. Take 5-2, normal calories for 5 days of the week, 500 calories for 2 days of the week. Keto, basically very low protein, no carbohydrate, high fat diet. Skipping breakfast takes an entire meal out of the equation, which means in theory you should eat less calories over the day, as long as you don't full send later on. Slimming World, SINs, things like that. It's trying to get you to count calories in a different way. You could just count calories, but it's trying to get you to do that in a different way, and it's trying to moderate how much you eat. Calorie tracking, educational tool. Yes, we lean slightly towards that side of things because it educates you what's in your food. And again, you're sticking to an amount and then you're trying to apply that amount of calories over time, thus leading to the principle of calorie deficit to drop body fat. Low carb, same thing, Cambridge diet. Like literally we could have filled the screen with every single diet under the sun. But all of these diets or protocols are trying to get you closer as the consumer to the principle, which is dropping body fat over time because you're in a sustained, consistent, healthy calorie deficit.
I think with this, the only thing I could add is all of our foods these days have them labels on it. It tells you how many calories it is for one bar of chocolate or something like that. So if you get a share bar, how many cubes is the calories? So I would just be aware of what calories you're consuming. Do you need 200 grams of rice? Is 100 grams enough? How does that look like on your actual plate? That kind of thing.
Cool. So that is...
We didn't stick it to 10 or 15 minutes, guys. Really sorry. But hopefully that gives you a lot of information on nutrition. Watch it back if you feel like, wow, mind blown by Scientist Beth today. If you've got any additional questions, please feel free to comment below or text us in your WhatsApp groups. Yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Have a good day. Take care.